Since August of last year, the Shanghai Futures Exchange silver inventories were 7.5 million ounces. They are now touch almost 60 million ounces. It's a phenomenal increase of silver that has gone into the Shanghai Futures Exchange. On November 11th, they have now allowed that the Chinese can import silver concentrate. We started seeing a lot more silver going into China.
70% of all gold production in the U.S. comes from a single state, Nevada. Conventional wisdom says that all the good deposits have been found. But one geologist who's discovered more than 30 million ounces of gold says he knows where to find Nevada's missing gold. And right now, he may be on the verge of being proven right. Investors and speculators can learn more at crushthestreet.com/gold.
Hello everyone, I am Kenneth Amaduri and I'm joined today with Steve St. Angelo of the SRSRocco report.com. Steve is the man to talk to when it comes to precious metals, oil, macroeconomics. He just does the research across the board. Some new information actually. He's now affiliated with a precious metals dealer expert, Tom Cloud. And I haven't talked to Steve since silver has climbed over $17 an ounce here. So this no doubt will be the man to talk to who really digs in behind the scenes and really brings to the surface what is going on in these markets. Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, Kenneth, it's a pleasure to catch up. Things seem to be happening at a much quicker rate today, and it is interesting to see the precious metals pop over the past quarter now into April, and so there's a lot to talk about.
There sure is. Silver is now around $17.50. Had a nice little pop, especially after yesterday's meeting with the Fed. But I'll start you off here, Steve. What does the gold-silver ratio hitting 83 earlier this year and now coming down to around the 71 range, this closing of the gap mean to you? Does this something you look at?
I do. One of the things, as you know, folks who read my work, follow my work, I tend to look at more of the bird's eye view. There's a lot of analysts out there that they're more traders, and they look at more of a daily, weekly, quarterly, how things are changing in the markets. But I tend to look at trends. So a falling gold-silver ratio is an interesting trend. Now, is this the beginning of a much lower movement in the gold-silver ratio? And of course, that's a good question because right now the price of gold and silver, gold really popped in the first 2-3 months. And then both the metals kind of fell a little bit, and then silver came back this last month in April and really popped further than gold did. And so a lot of analysts are saying, well, we've been waiting to see silver move higher than gold to correspond to gold's movement. And like Michael Bilkin, he's been on King World News. What was interesting about Michael Bilkin, he has this very expensive newsletter he gives to hedge funds and large clients, but he's been writing a smaller gold, silver stock report for the regular folks. And he did, I have to give him credit, he came out on King World News in November and said, the end of November, beginning December, he was starting to recommend and writing this new small gold report for regular investors, and he recommended gold stocks. And sure enough, in the first quarter, gold and gold stocks just blew. Well, at the beginning of April, he came out and not changed, but he had an update, and now he's doing a silver stock report, telling him which the top silver stocks he recommends, because he sees now silver stocks and silver really taking off, and they have. But he also said that we would see higher prices by the end of the year. Now, let me say this. There's two things going on. There's a lot of stuff happening in the markets and the economies, and in China with their new gold fix that came out on April 19th. That's when we really started seeing the metals pop. They popped pretty good that day, and so we have that going on. But then we also have the commercials, which are now at year record highs. I think the commercials are short over 240,000 gold contracts, and they're short 80,000 silver. So there's speculation now by many in the industry that because of this extreme high gold and silver short leverage with the commercial banks, that we're going to see another flush. And Kenneth, that may happen, and it has in the past. But when you look at all the events that are happening, the secret Fed meetings last week after this new Chinese gold fix, and I've heard that the meetings have continued throughout the week, something seems to be different. So could this be the short covering rally like we had in oil in the beginning of the year? But the specs were very short. This time the commercials are short, and they've never gotten blown out of their position. So we don't know. We do know at some point in time the commercials will have to be dealt with a short covering rally. I don't know if this is the one, but we can talk about the mid to longer term movement, and that's where I'm more concerned. I find it interesting to see what happens on a short-term basis, but I'm more concerned with Americans and investors on the medium to long-term basis.
Well, let's talk about silver, and physical silver bar and coin demand is at near records, as you've put it. And I want to ask you, in regards to where you think it's going here, are we seeing record amounts of dollar volume entering the silver market at the moment, or is it just record amount of ounces? But and just your thoughts on that, your analysis regarding the money flow, because we got a lot of manipulation, but I want to know where the money flow is in regards to the physical.
Yeah, of course in 2011 we had, I don't have the figure on the top of my head, but I believe it was over 200 million ounces of physical silver bar and coin demand. That was according to the World Silver Survey. And that's when silver was averaged $35 an ounce. Well, I think this year they're estimating it's going to be 200 million ounces as well. But the price is half, or it was $15 to $16 in 2015. So on a dollar amount, no, we're not seeing the same kind of volume as we did in 2011. But in my recent article, which I wrote this week, I called it the reason to invest in silver is the fundamentals. Again, I like to look at the bird's eye view. Before we had the collapse of the U.S. housing and banking market system in 2007, from 2000 to 2007, 8 years, total physical silver bar and coin demand was about, let's say, about 375 million ounces, estimated about that much. Well, from 2008 to 2015, it's quadrupled. It's now 1.4 billion ounces. And even though some years it's fallen a little bit, it continues to be elevated. And I think the reason why it continues to be elevated is because we haven't changed anything. All we have done, the Fed and central banks have done, have postponed the inevitable, which makes it worse. And I don't know if you saw this article by Zero Hedge, but Japan, from what the statistics show, that the Japanese government is one of the top 10 holders in 90% of the stocks on the Nikkei.
Wow.
So, and then people say, well, that's Japan and maybe China, but that's not the United States. Well, I don't see how it's not the United States. If they're propping up their markets, we have to be propping up our markets. Just like in the mortgage crisis, I saw a documentary, one of the guys who were interviewed, he was one of the more sound mortgage lenders. He had a big company in California, and he said, I had to finally start selling, doing these garbage loans, these junk loans, because if I didn't do that, I couldn't compete in the market. I went out of business. So I don't see how the United States, the federal government, or the plunge protection team are not in the markets as well. And
so is that what you're saying? Essentially, the rest of the world is in the markets, and the only way to compete is for the U.S. to be in the markets as well, and there really is no other option other than to do what everyone else is doing?
That makes sense to me, because I don't see. We know the plunge protection team has that ability to do that. They just haven't made it public. Japan has, and China has, So we don't know what other countries are doing it, but it just makes sense to me that I don't see how the United States isn't doing it. And so when you have the government propping up not only the stock market to a degree, we don't know how much, but the bond market as well. And so the precious metals have not been propped up because it's not in the best interest to prop up the metals because they are a barometer against the fiat monetary system and this highly over-leveraged system. So how much longer can they continue to do that? Well, look at yesterday. I think the Nikkei was up trading last night. It was up 100 and something points. Well, I guess the government came out and said, we're not going to continue with this QE, and the market I saw was down 550 points. And then it was interesting, gold and silver were actually down a little bit last night in Asian trading, and as soon as that came out, they were up. And now today, gold is up $20, silver is up 35 cents. So these aren't rational markets. They're so irrational, and so to me, the best place to be is in safety, and safety is not stocks, bonds, or even real estate. To me, safety is physical precious metals, Ken.
Yeah, I got to agree. And, what you just described there, it does sound like the precious metals are starting to act rationally as opposed to the way they did, over the last few years. I mean, it seemed like any type of bad news brought the metals down time and time again, but this time the bad news actually had a good response from precious metals. So do you think this is going to continue in the bullish direction, or is the conventional wisdom of precious metals changing here? Or is it simply the cartel is being broken? The manipulation is not working the way it did during the severe bear market that we had endured over the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, my best answer is I don't know, but let me qualify that with some different items I've seen. What is interesting? Since August of last year, the Shanghai Futures Exchange silver inventories were 7.5 million ounces. They are now touch almost 60 million ounces. It's a phenomenal increase of silver that has gone into the Shanghai Futures Exchange. I think part of it is slower economic activity in China. Another part is the Chinese government has now allowed, as of November 11th, they have now allowed that the Chinese can import silver concentrate. Before they could not do that. But they, as of November 11th, and so then we start seeing a lot more silver being that going into China, especially into the Shanghai Futures Exchange. Now, what's interesting, J.P. Morgan is the big deal out there. I wrote an article showing the difference between the two, and I said, why are the Chinese stockpiling silver? Is a big price move coming? Well, if we look at the two largest exchanges now with a lot of silver, it's J.P. Morgan. They had 4 million ounces April 2012. It grew to 69 million ounces in April 2016, 4 years. Well, the Shanghai went from 7.5 now to 59, almost 60 in about 8 months.
Wow.
So what we're seeing is not only is China still buying a lot of gold, accumulating a lot of gold, so is Russia and India, and now China is accumulating a lot of silver. Right at the time they have announced the new gold fix. And then we had all these crazy Fed meetings, secret meetings last week, as well as central banks from different parts of the world came over. And I even heard on Tuesday of the 19th that there were Congress and the Senate were doing these, working all night. And so something does seem to have changed. Whether this is the one that the comics, let's say the commercials are overrun, could be, but I can't give that answer. But I still say, as time goes on, another 6 months, another year, another 2 years, it's just more favorable for owning physical gold and silver.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, Steve. Steve, you know what? I kind of envy the new investor to precious metals, only because the last few years have been pretty devastating. I mean, most people who've been buying over the last few years have accumulated a lot of their metal at 30, 35, maybe in the 20s. If you've been in it for some time, maybe you've invested for years and you got a lot of it in the teens, only to see, I'm talking about silver here, only to see it come back down to the teens. And of course, gold, 1900, maybe a lot of people bought in the $1,600 range, $1,500 range. But my question is this: for the uneducated precious metals investor, maybe a new person on the block, do you have any suggestions for pitfalls for people looking to purchase physical precious metals and what to avoid?
Okay, that's a good question, and we spoke about that before the interview. And I think I have been looking at the precious metals, the mining industry, and the energy industry for the last decade. Been writing articles about it, and then started a blog in 2013. And I've been focusing on those aspects. Even though I've been purchasing metals, I never really paid much attention to the retail market, the retail wholesale market, the differences of why you purchase from this dealer or that dealer, the different why you purchase certain aspects of gold or silver, and what products are better to buy. And then I've now finally teamed up with have a affiliation with Tom Cloud. He's a precious metal expert, and he has been doing this since 1977. And I find him to be one of the most honest, trustworthy, and upfront dealers you'll ever come across. And the reason I say that is I wrote this, and if you go to my site, there's a new tab at the top. It's called Precious Metal Investing. The SRSRocco report doesn't sell any metals. We'll never sell metals. But I am sponsoring and affiliating Tom Cloud because I believe he's one of the most honest, trustworthy, and has the best prices on products and services in the industry. I wrote this story that if you go to my precious metal investing page, you'll see Tom Cloud. I put updates. He actually does YouTube updates. And underneath it, I say why and describe why I've decided to be affiliated with him. And I've been offered other arrangements before, but have declined. One of my neighbors, I was speaking to him about precious metals, and over the months, let's say year, he became very interested. And I didn't know he purchased gold or silver. And then one day he told me he did, and I was excited for him. But about 2-3 months later, I found out, he said, wow, the metal prices moved up a lot from where I purchased it, but I'm way under. My value of what I own is way under the market value. And I began to realize that he had purchased this metal from one of the large dealers you might see on TV, where they charge these large premiums, high premiums for, let's say, rare coins. Well, Tom Cloud is a numismatic specialist. However, he can grade numismatic coins. Been doing it. He's a part of a board, 2 boards of numismatic coins, rare coins. But he believes investors should own the bullion coins. So this is the reason why I'm trying to get investors, new and even experienced investors, to understand what Tom Cloud offers. Because not only does he can help educate, and no one has to buy metals from him. They can just call him up and ask questions, and they can call around. And people who do that, they find out he has the best rates. And there's a lot more to it, but I wanted to offer SRSRocco report readers and viewers the opportunity to really understand what is happening, and he will continue to do updates. We're going to do updates every 2 weeks, kind of tell what's going on in the markets, what he sees, different things that are happening in the precious metals, discuss different programs. And for example, let's say you want to store metal outside your home. He has a storage that is the cheapest in the industry. And actually, it could be stored fully allocated in a COMEX non-bank approved vault in Delaware. And it is the cheapest in the industry if a person wanted to use that kind of facility. And so these are the kind of things we want to get out to help investors make better decisions, understand what are better products to buy. And so that's the reason why I am now affiliated with him, and look forward to educating people on the retail end of owning and purchasing precious metals, as well as selling them.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I wanted to follow up with a question. You mentioned that a lot of people are paying excessive premiums for numismatic, but you were also telling me before the interview that people are paying excessive premiums for just regular bullion bars and coins as well. And this is something that an uneducated new buyer of physical metal might not realize. They might just go to their local first thing that comes up and pay an exorbitant premium. So if you'd want to just share a little bit about that too before we go on.
Okay, and this is something more to call up. And if you do go to the website, as I said, I am affiliated with Tom Cloud. He's got a gentleman named Dan and Kathleen work with him. It's a very small office, but he's been in business since 1977, knows most of the people in the precious metal wholesale market. I mean, every time I talk to him, Kenneth, the information that I get is unbelievable. But the thing is, he says outright he charges 2.5% commission for gold and 3% commission for silver, and this is above the premium. And the thing is, sometimes if people call up their dealer and they ask, okay, what is your commission? They may give you the premium, but not the commission. See, the premium is what the wholesaler charges for the dealer to buy, and then it's their commission. And a lot of times, they don't want the precious metal investor, purchaser, to know that information. And Tom is very upfront and honest about it. And so he tells you outright what those fees are. And, of course, he doesn't charge any shipping or insurance as well when you sell the metal, if you purchase from him. And it is stored at the IDS facility. He does not charge to sell it. Many other companies will charge a commission to sell the metal. That is kind of, they'll adjust the premium of when they buy it back from you. They'll lower what they'll pay you. And I actually didn't know that until I spoke with him. So it's just a good idea to know more, educate yourself. And again, no one has to buy metals from a dealer, but I think if you call Tom Cloud up, now he's good. He is on vacation for a week. He won't be getting back from vacation. This is his first vacation in quite a long time. But you can talk to any of his associates there. But I do think helping people getting into the metals and storing them, if they want to store them, at the most reasonable rates. And actually, some things are better to be purchased than others. Certain products are better to be purchased than others because when you purchase, let's say, gold eagles, there is no 1099, but when you purchase gold bullion, a certain amount, there would be a 1099 that has to be sent to the government. So we're going to get into all the different things in the future. What are better products to own for what reasons? And I think it's a fascinating way to help the precious metal community.
Well, you've been helping us for years now, and we really do appreciate this new information here. Steve, I want to ask you a personal question here. You advocate and lead by example a very prudent lifestyle. And I want to ask you, were you always this way, or did something happen in your life that made you take the future a bit more seriously?
Born and raised in New York. Lived in Long Island until I was a kid. We moved to Florida, Cocoa Beach, Florida, for several years. We were down there I was down there for 10 years. And then I lived in the big city, Orlando and Atlanta, for quite a long time. But I always wanted to get back to the land because I always had a yearning to get back and to live life a little bit more simple. But it wasn't until the research I did in 2000, when I started buying precious metals in 2002, I remember my first bar I purchased for $4.92 an ounce. I started researching the precious metals back then, and then I saw what was happening in our economy with the crazy mortgage industry and the banking industry. And then you see Peter Schiff on CNBC saying it's all going to come crashing down. Mm-hmm. Well, he said it for 3 years, and it finally did. And so at that point, my wife and I decided to move to the country. And I just thought it was a good move, and sure enough, the collapse came. And I wasn't surprised, but as I said before in interviews, we are surprised how much they propped it up. And now the thing is, we've used a lot of liquidity. The Fed and central banks used a lot of liquidity, and then they dropped interest rates to zero, and that brought on this shale oil, which kind of kept things going for another 5, 7, 8 years. However, a lot of the shale oil fields are really peaking and falling quickly now. And so I think by 2020, Kenneth, U.S. oil production is really going to fall, and by 2025, we could see 75% decline in U.S. oil production. And so at that point in time, I think it's prudent to be out of the major cities. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but I think it's going to be really rough to keep business as usual going with that kind of a change in our energy production. So that's the reason why I moved out to the country. Yes, maybe I moved out a little early, or got into the precious metals early, but early is better than too late. And so I do think it's good to protect yourself in many ways. And I do think the survival websites are very important too. There's a lot of different benefits, so let's say skills to have besides financial protecting and precious metals. There's a lot of skills we could acquire that don't take a lot of time. It just take effort to do some of these things. So I do believe in living a little more simple, away from the big cities, if possible.
Steve, those were some great closing thoughts, and again, always some really good insight regarding the macroeconomics, what's going on here in the U.S., what's going on with precious metals, and really what to do with our investments. So if people wanted to reach out to you and learn more about what you are doing and what you're currently doing, I know you talked about it a little bit, where would they go and what would they find?
Okay, you can go to the SRSRocco report, and I just put out a new article yesterday called Precious Metal Investor Must See Important Charts and Data. And this is something that came to me due to, I've been wanting to write about this, but it's also in rebuttal to Keith Weiner, who writes about the gold silver basis. He's more of a short-term analyst trader, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's different than a medium to long-term view. And so I try to show people the important thing to look at, the medium and long-term view of the market. And I also recently put out a new gold report. You could check that out. It's about the huge change of investment flows in the first quarter. And lastly, as I did mention, we mentioned that I am now affiliated with Tom Cloud. And anytime someone calls Tom up or his associates, they always ask, well, where did you hear us? Where did you hear about us? And some people will say, well, I'm not going to tell them I heard from Steve or SRSRocco report because I don't want to pay more. Well, we have worked out arrangement that anybody who calls and talks to Tom doesn't pay any more than if you didn't mention where you heard from us. And they'd like to know where they were discovered. So I just wanted to say that, and it's going to be interesting, Kenneth. I'd like to maybe touch base again in another month or two to see how this huge commercial short positions in gold and silver, how they worked out. Did they knock the metals down once again, or is this a different story going forward? It is a different story going forward. I don't know if it's today, it's 6 months, or a year or so, but it will be a much different story in the medium to long term. Yeah. And that's where investors should be buying the metals, just like a retirement account. Instead of putting digits in a bank for when you retire, I believe you should just acquire the metals, physical metals, to retire. That's the difference I see. And so you don't have to worry about the short-term movements. You're worried more about the medium to long term.
Always something to talk about, and I do look forward to that call. I got to tell you, my wife is having contractions at the moment. Oh, every 30 minutes she's having contractions. So Amongst the bad news, I look forward to precious metals rising and also the birth of a new child here. So I'll try not to be too down in this time, and I look forward to talking to you in the very short term here. Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show with me.
Always a pleasure, and congratulations on the new arrival.